welcome to another episode of Codovision, where you feel the TV power through audio. I am Mark Codo, aka Codoman, your Codovision host. That is right, folks. We are back for episode 2 of Codovision. I am super excited for this one because for this episode, I'm going to talk about another pilot episode from a TV show from another streaming service. Now, this one is going to be from Disney Plus, and the pilot episode will be from the live action Star Wars TV show, The Mandalorian. And the reason why I want to talk about it because The Mandalorian is one of the most popular live action Star Wars TV shows. And of course, obviously, it became the first live action Star Wars TV show, and the show itself also serves as the launching point for Disney Plus. Now, just to let you all know, The Mandalorian's not the only Star Wars TV series, although it is, as I mentioned, it is the first live action Star Wars TV show. Now, sure, yes. Yes, Star Wars did have its fair share of live action specials, I should say. You know, like the infamous Star Wars holiday special that came out in 1978. And then, of course, you also have the two Ewok adventures that also came out as well. And that's mainly it, because most of those were just basically television specials or made for TV movies, I should say. But when you really think about Star Wars for TV, like normally normally there's Star Wars The Clone Wars, Star Wars Rebels, and then of course Genndy Tartakovsky's version of Star Wars Clone Wars as well. So yeah, there has been a few, although many people will remember Star Wars The Clone Wars, Star Wars Rebels, and then of course the Genndy Tartakovsky's Star Wars Clone Wars show too. But not as much for live action Star Wars. Like, what is it like to have a live action Star Wars TV show? Well, that's where The Mandalorian comes in. Now, as for The Mandalorian, the show itself takes place 5 years after the events of Star Wars Episode 6 Return of the Jedi, and it follows a lone bounty hunter who protects a Force sensitive child from Imperial forces. Now, since I'm going to talk about the pilot episode, here's a brief summary of the pilot episode. A lone bounty hunter, only known as the Mandalorian, who accepts a mission given by a mysterious client who tasks him to bring alive a 50-year-old target. He is helped by a vapor farmer named Queel in exchange of ending the constant bounty hunting activity in his area. Okay, so that's the brief summary of the pilot episode. I will break down the episode as well. Now, before I do this, I want to give my brief history on Star Wars. Now, I have seen all 9 Star Wars movies. I've seen them all. I've seen all 9 movies. The original trilogy, the prequel trilogy, and then the sequel trilogy as well. I've also seen the Star Wars The Clone Wars movie as well. I've watched the first 3 seasons of Star Wars The Clone Wars, and then I'm still on season 4, by the way. I haven't gotten that far into season 4, but I have seen I have seen the 2-part finale of season 4 of Star Wars The Clone Wars when I was little, where Darth Maul returned in season 4 of Star Wars The Clone Wars, and then I've seen parts of season 5. I did not watch season 6, although I've seen the first 4 episodes of season 7 and the last 4 episodes of season 7 of the Clone Wars as well. I didn't get through the mid portion of season 7. I unfortunately skipped that portion. I heard some people were mixed on the mid portion of season 7 of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and then obviously I've watched all 3 seasons of Mandalorian. The Mandalorian TV show has 3 seasons. I've watched the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV show. I've also watched I've also watched the Ahsoka Tano show and the Book of Boba Fett. And I've always seen a couple of episodes of the Star Wars TV show Andor. And then of course I've also seen parts of Star Wars Rebels and Genndy Tartakovsky's Star Wars Clone Wars show. The Mandalorian was not only the launching point for Disney Plus, which came out on November 12th of 2019, which is also known as Disney Plus Day, but it also opened the door for more live action Star Wars TV shows, which also explains why you get the Book of Boba Fett, the Obi-Wan Kenobi TV show, the Ahsoka Tano show, you name them. And then of course, we're also getting the Star Wars Acolyte TV show coming out as well on Disney Plus. And with that being said, like the Mandalorian was literally one of the main launching points that opened the door for more live action Star Wars TV shows. And I think and I say that's amazing. That is literally amazing because with the success of Mandalorian, we would have gotten more live action Star Wars TV shows. And to the credits of the Mandalorian, that's awesome. And also, for those of you who are probably listening, Codovision is on Spotify, and of course Spotify for podcasters, and of course on YouTube as well. So for anybody who is listening wants to hear the it also wants to listen to this episode on YouTube as well. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is Mark Kodo. That's where my podcast Codovision is also on. So if you're listening through Spotify and Spotify through podcasters, like after this episode, you want to subscribe to my channel, you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Mark Kodo. So hit the subscribe button. That way, more podcast episodes of Codovision will be on as well. This is episode 2, by the way, and I will be doing more episodes of Codovision in the nearby future as well. So let's talk about the production history of The Mandalorian. Jon Favreau serves as the head writer for the show for the Mandalorian show alongside Dave Filoni, who was announced to direct 2 episodes for the show. Both Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau served as executive producers alongside Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy and film producer Colin Wilson. As for Dave Filoni is known for his creation of Star Wars: The Clone Wars, which aired on Cartoon Network, which also follows in the footsteps of Genndy Tartakovsky's Star Wars: Clone Wars as well. And then also, Dave Filoni is also known for doing Star Wars Rebels as well, which aired on the Disney Channel and Disney XD. Star Wars isn't the only project that Dave Filoni contributed to. He also contributed to the first season of the animated Nickelodeon TV show Avatar: The Last Airbender, to which that show, Avatar: The Last Airbender, for those of you who have seen or have not seen this show, Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of the greatest animated TV shows of all time for Nickelodeon. And I've seen the entire series. That show is amazing. Amazing show. But anyway, going back to the production history of Mandalorian, the visual effects company Industrial Light and Magic developed the stagecraft technology for the series, displaying digital backgrounds on a 360-degree video wall. This has since been adopted by other film and television productions. So there's a new visual effects technology called stagecraft where digital backgrounds are displayed on a 360-degree video wall, and that was basically used for the Mandalorian, and I believe that is awesome. And also to say this too, there's also a mix of CGI and practical effects in the Mandalorian as well, which I also believe is awesome too. Find a nice little balance between practical effects and CGI, while also using the 360-degree video wall as well. Now, of course, we gotta also mention the music as well. Now, the music for The Mandalorian was composed by Ludwig Göransson. For those of you who may or may not know who Ludwig Göransson is, he composed the music for the first 2 Black Panther movies with Ryan Coogler, to which Ludwig Göransson won the Academy Award for Best Original Score for the first Black Panther movie. He also won his second Academy Award for the Christopher Nolan biopic Oppenheimer. He also composed music for Disney Pixar's Turning Red as well. Now, he's also collaborated with Donald Glover on his song This Is America as well. Speaking of Donald Glover, Ryan Coogler, Anthony Joe Russo, and Donald Glover recommended Jon Favreau to bring Ludwig Göransson on board for The Mandalorian. And Favreau knew that the music would be important to the series due to the impact of John Williams. Because John Williams wrote the score for all 9 Star Wars movies. But Favreau also wanted the music of the series to be different from the films, and he wanted the series to sound a lot grittier, a little edgier, and of course a little more tech oriented. And Gorson first met with Favreau in November of 2018. And when Favreau showed the composer concept art for the series and discussed his inspirations for the story and tone, including Western and samurai films. And the two also discussed on how they felt when they first heard the score from John Williams from Star Wars. And of course, with that being said, Gorson set out to recreate those feelings and capture the soul of what Star Wars is, but a new way. And I believe that is a good thing. I like how the music can sound a little different compared to what the movies had. Now, granted, this is not the first time because Star Wars, the Clone Wars, and of course Star Wars Rebels all had different musical feels to it. But they also, but some moments in Star Wars Rebels and Star Wars Clone Wars echoes back to John Williams' music as well. So technically it's not the first time, but in live action. But for a live action Star Wars TV show, I'd say that's pretty cool. It is also cool to go in a different direction while also paying respect to John Williams as well. Now, Gorson was brought on board as the composer for the series in December of 2018, and the basic of the main theme was created from Gorson, experimenting with a bass recorder, digitally manipulating it to make it more futuristic, with guitars, a piano, drums, and synthesizers as well. And they were all featured in the main theme. And it also included a 70-piece orchestra that was being used for the first season. And of course, combined with recordings of Gorson playing the main instruments, which he augmented with synthesizers and other digital manipulation. Now, for anybody who is big into music, whether it's music composing, music teaching, or even music technology as well, I say this would be an awesome way to teach your future music students on what it's like to compose electronic music as well. There's a documentary on Disney Plus that talks about the first season of The Mandalorian as well, and there's an episode that focuses on Ludwig Göransson's music for the first season of The Mandalorian. I think this will be a great way to teach your students. This should be taught in a music class as well for those who are interested in composing music and of course composing electronic music as well. I say this will be a great opportunity to teach your students how to create electronic music. And I think the first season of The Mandalorian is a great example because the music in this show is amazing. And that credit goes to Ludwig Göransson. Ludwig, if you are listening to this episode, you have my full respect. You have created this amazing score for The Mandalorian. You have done an awesome job on this show. Now we are coming on by to the breakdown of the pilot episode. Before I dive into the breakdown, let me talk about who was involved in the Mandalorian pilot episode. Well, you have cast members such as Pedro Pascal, Carl Weathers, Werner Herzog, Taika Waititi, and Omid Abtahi, and of course Nick Nolte as well. And those are some of the cast members right there for the show. And yeah, those are some of our cast members for the pilot episode of the Mandalorians. So the pilot episode for the Mandalorian, titled Chapter 1, The Mandalorian, is directed by Dave Filoni, and The Mandalorian marks Dave Filoni's live action debut. So let's get right to it for the pilot episode of The Mandalorian. So the show opens up on an ice planet called Pagodon, and it takes place 5 years after the fall of the Empire, which obviously 5 years after Return of the Jedi. A Mandalorian bounty hunter who is being played by Pedro Pascal. He collects a fugitive Mythrol and saves the fugitive's life after a scuffle in a bar, and returns to the planet Navarro in his ship, the Razor Crest. He meets Grief Karga, played by Carl Weathers, who is the leader of the Bounty Hunters Guild, but is dismayed that the only bounties available will not even cover the cost of fuel for his ship. In desperation, he accepts a mysterious commission for which Karga can only provide an address to meet the client, to which the client is being played by Werner Herzog. The client, who uses former Imperial stormtroopers as bodyguards, gives the Mandalorian a vague target to bring back alive. The only information he is allowed to give is an age, 50 years old, and last known location. In exchange, the client promises to reward the bounty hunter with a container full of Beskar, a rare metal used by Mandalorians to forge their armor. Receiving a single bar of Beskar as a down payment, the Mandalorian meets with the armorer at an enclave housing fellow Mandalorians. The armorer, who melts the metal into a pauldron reserved for the Mandalorian, says the metal was gathered in the Great Purge, and the excess will sponsor foundlings, as the Mandalorian once was. The Mandalorian travels to the desert planet, which is called Arvela 7, and meets with a moisture farmer named Queel, and Queel is being played by Nick Nolte, who wants to be rid of the vicious outlaws and mercenaries hiding in the area. And with that being said, Queel teaches the Mandalorian to ride a blurg, as there are no land speed vehicles to travel to the area, and sends him to where his bounty is located. Upon reaching the hideout, the Mandalorian grudgingly teams up with a bounty droid named IG-11, who's being played by Taika Waititi, and they're both hunting down the same target as well. But unfortunately, the two are under attack by a bunch of guards, and they manage to clear the entire facility and discover that the bounty is a green, big-eared, childlike creature. And IG-11 reveals that its orders are to kill the child. Despite being offered a share of the reward, the Mandalorian instead chooses to shoot the droid. And at the end of the episode, it's the Mandalorian pointing his finger at the child, and the child is doing the same thing as well. And then it cuts to black. And that's basically it. That is the breakdown of the first episode of The Mandalorian. Now, of course, got to give my own thoughts on this. What did I think of this episode? Oh, I like this episode. This was actually a good episode. A good start for the series because it leaves you wanting more. At the end of the pilot episode, it leaves you wanting more. That's how like a pilot episode ends. You want to see more. What could we see more of? Are we going to see more of the Mandalorian and the child? Are we going to see that? Oh yeah, we're definitely going to see more of that because that's how the episode ends. And of course, pilot episode on IMDb rated it an 8.6 out of 10, and then of course going to Rotten Tomatoes, the critics gave it a score of 90%. And that is a good start, and that's a good start for the pilot episode of The Mandalorian, and of course the series as a whole as well. Now I'm going to mention a few things on what I like about this pilot. What I like about the show, it's basically a space western. There are plenty of western genre TV shows and movies as well, but not as much for science fiction as well. Now, granted, there are some shows and movies where they go into a little bit of into space western territory. I mean, sure, yeah, the Han Solo movie was a space western as well. But what about TV shows? Like, I haven't heard much of a space western TV show. I mean, not as much in my personal opinion. But for this one, this one is where it feels a little more space western to me, if you really think about it. Now, of course, the casting of Pedro Pascal was also cool too. Pedro Pascal, who voices the Mandalorian, he did a fantastic job voicing this character, and his character, like the character of the Mandalorian, like, you could definitely tell that he is more of a Clint Eastwood type character because this show took inspiration from a lot of Western movies, most notably the Man with No Name, starring Clint Eastwood, And then, of course, if you also want to argue, other Western movies as well, including the Wild Bunch as well, because the shootout scene with IG-11 and the Mandalorian, like it takes inspiration from the Wild Bunch movie, particularly its final scene where you have this massive shootout where all the members of the Wild Bunch are taking out an army. That's what that final shootout looks like. The Mandalorian and IG-11 wiped out all the guards in this facility, and it feels like an actual Western shootout. That's what I really liked about the ending of that episode. And of course, may I mention the elephant in the room, the child, who is basically this green, big-eared child, right? This green, big-eared, childlike creature. Yeah, you know who I'm talking about. You know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Baby Yoda. Yes, the reveal of Baby Yoda. Like, I didn't watch the first episode until I got home for Thanksgiving break. That was when I first saw the episode. But after the show was released on November 12th, a lot of people started posting that, oh my goodness, it's Baby Yoda! Everybody exploded on that. Like, and I'm just wondering, what the hell is going on? Why is everybody all excited for this Baby Yoda thing? And I didn't know what that was until I saw the episode. I was like, oh my goodness, I didn't know what the writer, I didn't know what Jon Favreau was thinking of. Like, is Jon Favreau putting in Baby Yoda just to get everybody to watch this show? And it seems to work. It seems to work because knowing the fact that the Mandalorian and IG-11 were tasked to hunt down this child, even though they didn't even know who it was. And of course, I like this line that the Mandalorian said. He was like, "Wait a minute, I was told that this thing was 50 years old." Like, you hear him that he said it was 50 years old, because when you really think about it, you're thinking 50 years old, like 50 years old, you're like at middle age. Well, apparently for I don't know, for the species that Baby Yoda is, his age is basically more baby-like for his species, if you want to say. Now, I don't know what species Yoda is. I mean, they never really specify the species, like what's his alien, what his alien species is. I mean, I don't know what his species is, but I think that is left up in the air. I do like that line that the Mandalorian give, and I like how IG-11 backs this up. IG-11 backs this up. Well, as you can see, I mean, age can be a little different for these type of creatures. So there's your answer. So there's your answer right there for why Baby Yoda's age and size is a little different. But of course, speaking of IG-11, I know a lot of people said that IG-11 looks a lot like IG-88 from Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back, and that's where a lot of people were speculating that maybe Taika Waititi was playing IG-88. But no, this is a different IG droid. Even though yes, IG-11 is similar to IG-88, but this is a different droid. Just to throw that out there. And even though Taika Waititi was on screen for a short amount of time, it is nice to hear Taika Waititi putting his voice into IG-11, because he and the Mandalorian really teamed up pretty well at the end of that episode, which I really enjoyed. I love the banter that they had. It was pretty argumentative at one point, but of course they were able to settle their differences at the end, near the end, until IG-11 decides, like, no, 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 I was told to terminate this creature. But I like how the Mandalorian is like, no, I'm not gonna kill this creature. He shoots IG-11 in the head because he didn't want IG-11 to kill the child, because the child, you see the child right there, he's basically a baby. I mean, why kill a baby like that? I mean, why? Why? Why do that? And this is where the Mandalorian, like the Mandalorian, he grew a dad bone on his back right now. Like, he realizes, like, no, I'm not gonna do, no, I'm not, I didn't sign up to kill this I did not sign up to kill this child. I was signed up to bring this child back alive. And that was the whole point of that, and that was the point of the assignment. He was trying to bring the child back alive. The child, or Baby Yoda, is just a baby. It's too young. Why would IG-11 do that? I mean, like, what the hell, man? What the hell, IG-11? Oh my goodness. But anyway, I like how at the end of the episode it was just Mandalorian and Baby Yoda, especially when they were pointing fingers at each other while the music is playing in the background. And and that was just basically it. I also like how the credits too, like, it was just all concept art of what we saw in the pilot episode. I believe that was a nice little touch as well. I believe that was a nice little touch, and it's real cool art design. It's real cool sequence of different concept arts as well. I want to jump back to the beginning too. Like, I like how the show opens up on his icy planet, and it's just basically the Mandalorian searching for his first bounty. It was a Mythrol, by the way. He was hunting him down because the Mandalorian's a bounty hunter, and he's trying to hunt down his bounty, and the Mythrol was basically his bounty. And I like how he enters this bar is just basically pure Western. It's basically pure Western, like Clint Eastwood. And he just walks in, no dialogue for the Mandalorian. He just walks in like a stranger that he is. He sits down just to have a drink. But of course, you get a couple of customers who are basically messing with this Mythrol. And then of course this guy just sees the Mandalorian walking in. He's like, who the hell are you? And he walks over to Mando, who's sitting right in front of the bartender, and this guy keeps rambling on Mando, saying, "Hey, Mando, you spilled my drink." And then the bartender says it to him as well. But of course, if you notice, if you go back to the scene, right, where this guy, and I think there's a Mon Mothman creature, like one of the Mon Calamari guys, this squid Mon Calamari guy. Like, it's just this guy and the squid Mon Calamari guy who is messing with this Mythrol. They were messing with this guy, and if you look closely at the bald guy's drink, who he is with the beard, like, the guy spilled the drink all by himself. Like, he was rocking that table, and his drink was on there, and he spilled it. If you look closely at that scene, and that was before the Mandalorian walked in. So technically, it wasn't the Mandalorian who spilled the drink. It was the other guy who spilled the drink. Just to throw that out there. Don't believe me? Go back to that first scene of the Mandalorian and watch closely at that drink in front of that blue Mythrol and that squid Mon Calamari guy and the human bald guy as well, who was also taunting the Mandalorian as well in the beginning of the scene. But I'm just telling you this: words do not describe how awesome that scene is, because the next thing is, the bartender tells the Mandalorian and the two other guys, "Don't worry, this drink's on me." Like, the Mandalorian grabs the drink, smacks it in the guy's face, and then of course stops this squid Mon Calamari guy from escaping by closing the door on the lower half of his body, cutting its legs. And I'm just like, Jiminy! I mean, holy crap, man! That is brutal. At least we didn't see the upper half of his body. Like, the Mandalorian just murdered that squid Mon Calamari guy. Wow. And then this next part I really liked is when the Mandalorian walks up to this blue Mythrol. The blue Mythrol, like, he was thanking the Mandalorian, but what he doesn't know is that the Mandalorian was hunting down this blue Mythrol. And the guy was like, buddy, I think there's a bit of a misunderstanding. This next part of the Mandalorian, and I really like this quote. He says, "I could bring you in warm, or I could bring you in cold." Chills down my spine. That is a badass quote that the Mandalorian said, and that was his first line. And he takes the blue Mythrol to his ship, which is the Razor Crest. While Ludwig Göransson's music is playing in the background, I like his entrance to the bar where the door opens when it features the Mandalorian. You hear the music. You hear the music from Ludwig Göransson. The first bit of music you hear from Ludwig Göransson is basically da 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 da. That is an awesome way to introduce your character. You let the music do the talking. That is amazing. And then of course, there are other moments in the show that I really liked. I really liked how like this planet Navarro that the Mandalorian goes to, like it is a rundown town that is like that it looks to be out of business. That almost looks like it's about to run out of business if you really think about it. Like if you really think about it, like this is like a reference to other Western movies, like where yeah, I mean yeah, don't forget Western movies they do have like this theme where oh it's a pretty nice small town, but also at the same time it is a rundown town where it almost like it's about to run out of business, but at the same time, it's the business is still running, if you know what I'm saying. Nice little nod to the classic westerns as well. Now, of course, Mandalorian meeting up with Grief Karga, who's being played by Carl Weathers. It's nice to see Carl Weathers in this show. Like he and the Mandalorian, they both show a good interaction with each other throughout this episode. Like Grief Karga is giving Mandalorian the bounty hunter missions to like hunt down his next bounty, if you just to say, leading up to another scene that I liked. I really liked the introduction to the client who is running this, who is basically giving the Mandalorian this special mission for a huge for a price of Beskar armor, and the client is being played by Werner Herzog, and I knew this guy was Werner Herzog. I recognize the actor playing the clients because Werner Herzog is not only an actor, he is also a director as well. He is a famous director for multiple German films that he has directed. And it's most notably with his collaboration with German actor Klaus Kinski on films such as Agari, The Wrath of God, Fitzcarraldo, and the 1979 Nosferatu movie. Although that's what many people will definitely remember Werner Herzog for his collaboration with Klaus Kinski. But of course, Herzog has done other projects as well. But the only projects I recognized for Werner Herzog was basically his projects with Klaus Kinski, most notably with Aguirre, The Wrath of God, the 1979 Nosferatu movie, and then of course Fitzcarraldo. Like those are the only films that I know. I haven't seen those films, but I heard the production history that went down on these films. Herzog also appeared in the Jack Reacher movie with Tom Cruise. He was also the narrator for the opening of the Penguins of Madagascar movie, most notably for the March of the Penguins sequence in the Penguins of Madagascar movie. But for The Mandalorian, I remember Werner Herzog from the Mandalorian TV show. That's how I remember this guy because of his appearance in The Mandalorian. And of course, going back to Grief Karga, is being played by Carl Weathers. Carl Weathers was in the first four Rocky movies as Apollo Creed. He also played Dylan in the Predator movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And then he was also Combat Carl in the Toy Story short, Toy Story of Terror. And of course, Chubbs from Happy Gilmore as well. Going back to the client has stormtroopers, mind you. And these stormtroopers were basically, I'm pretty sure they all used to work for the Empire, but as you can tell right away that the client and the stormtroopers are working for somebody else. Like, because this next moment comes in where Dr. Pershing, who's being played by Omid Abtahi, he comes in to talk to the client, and the client's like, don't worry, Mandalorian, this is Dr. Pershing. And you could definitely tell, like, those guys are working for someone at this point. At one point, I thought the client was going to be the main villain, but I was like, no, there's got to be somebody else. They're obviously working for somebody with the remains of the Empire after it's being fallen. So something is going on. What is the client want? What is the client doing? Why is the client giving the Mandalorian the bounty hunter job to find this to find this 50-year-old creature? And why is he paying him huge with the Beskar armor? You know something's coming up. Yeah, something is going on. So we all know how this is going down. The Mandalorian is giving a job to hunt down this creature to bring back to the client, and of course the doctor as well, Doctor Pershing. Before Mando leaves, like I like how the client gives Mando the Beskar armor, the one piece of Beskar armor as a down payment, and I like how he gives that piece of Beskar armor to the armorer in the Mandalorian enclave, which is basically at the bottom of the sewers of Navarro, and the armorer builds like a metal shoulder pad for one of his shoulders, because if you really notice something too, the Mandalorian's armor it's wearing off. It's getting all rusty. It's losing its touch. I should say it's losing its touch, which is why the armor created a new shoulder pad for the Mandalorian, which is now clean, fresh Beskar armor. And then another moment I also liked how the Mandalorian was going to this other planet. He meets up with Queel after a blurg attack, and Queel, who's being played by Nick Nolte. And fun fact, the stand-in for Queel is Misty Rosas, and so you got two actors. So you got two people involved as Queel. One of them is Misty Rosas for the performance artist, and Nick Nolte providing the voice. That is actually awesome. Now, I also like how Queel and the Mandalorian are basically talking, discussing, like, has any other bounty hunters come by this planet to find this bounty? And they were like, some tried and failed. And then, of course, Queel trains the Mandalorian to ride a blurg, like trying to ride a horse, But the Mandalorian is just basically like, this thing is useless. Do you have like a land speeder or a speeder bike or anything? But Queel says, but you're a Mandalorian. Your ancestors rode the great mythosaur. Surely you could ride this young blurg right here. Queel tells the Mandalorian, like, look, I know riding a blurg can be hard, but even your ancestors at the time rode creatures like the great mythosaur. How is that any different than riding a blurg? This gets the Mandalorian to keep on trying, and when he succeeded at trying to ride the blurg, and it works. And what also helps too is the music by Ludwig Göransson. It gives a nice Western vibe too. Like you hear this theme, dun 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 dun. Bum, 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 dun, 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 dun. Like that is so, like the rhythm and melody for that is so good. I love that music. This is why I love that music from Ludwig Göransson, man. It's got that Western feel to it. Like, it's also a theme for success for the Mandalorian, because he succeeded in trying to get on the blurg, learn how to ride it, and ride off with Queel to the location of where he's finding the child. And that is amazing as well. I like that. He is trying something new. Instead of, like, riding a speeder bike, he rides an actual creature, like a blurg. And I do like this last moment that Queel said to the Mandalorian, and he said this line before too, when he first met the Mandalorian after this blurg attack during their first encounter. And Queel was like, farewell, Mandalorian. I hope you're able to find what you're looking for in that small area. I have spoken. The last few lines that Queel says, I have spoken, great line. I have spoken. Meaning, like, well, he's like, well, you have my word. That's what he's basically trying to say. Like, I have spoken. Meaning, like, you have my word. I'm done speaking. You're definitely on your way, partner. And I really like that moment. That is awesome. And also, this is also another thing I want to mention too. Like, since it's also taking inspiration from other Western movies as well, there is a scene before the facility attack where it's just IG-11 trying to take down the guards. and Mandalorian teaming up with IG-11. There's a reference from a Clint Eastwood movie, and I believe it's from A Fistful of Dollars, where Clint Eastwood has to team up with a bounty hunter to take down a bunch of guards. That is the reference in the Mandalorian, in that scene in the Mandalorian where the Mandalorian is forced to team up with IG-11 just to take down the guards and of course get the bounty. And I like that team up too. And it's also funny too. They do share a little bit of banter in between where Mandalorian says, "If may I remind you, you are empty-handed. You are still empty-handed." And IG-11 was like, "This is also true." And this, I gotta give credit to Pedro Pascal and Taika Waititi. They both do a fantastic job. In fact, all the actors do an amazing job in this pilot episode. I really love their performances in this episode. But obviously, the main star has got to go to Pedro Pascal for playing the Mandalorian as well. And while I'm on the subject of the Mandalorian, of course, Pedro Pascal. Pedro Pascal is not the only actor involved in this show. The stuntmen who are involved in playing the Mandalorian, Brendan Wayne and Lateef Crowder, as the stunt doubles for the Mandalorian. Now, for those who don't know, Lateef Crowder is a Brazilian American actor, martial artist, and stuntman. Though he is a member of the Zero Gravity stunt team since 2000, and he is one of the stunt doubles for the Mandalorian. Now, as for Brendan Wayne, for those of you who may or may not know, Brendan Wayne is the grandson to Western actor John Wayne. Yes, John Wayne, the Duke himself, the old Western actor himself, long before Clint Eastwood came on board. We have Brendan Wayne as one of the stunt doubles for the Mandalorian, and Brendan Wayne is the grandson to Western actor John Wayne, the Duke himself, who is involved in multiple Western movies and so forth. And that is a literal legacy right there. You have John Wayne's grandson starring in a space western TV show. You got John Wayne's grandson in the Star Wars universe as a bounty hunter. And that's amazing. These two guys, Brendan Wayne and Lateef Crowder, deserve credit as well. Those two guys, Brendan Wayne, Lateef Crowder, and Pedro Pascal deserve credit for bringing the character of the Mandalorian to life. So basically, you have Pedro Pascal doing the voice, and then Brendan Wayne and Lateef Crowder joining in as the stuntman for the Mandalorian. That is amazing. And while on the subject of John Wayne has appeared in the very first Star Wars movie, although not physically, but his voice did. So it turns out John Wayne played this Q-Bass spy bounty hunter in Tatooine in Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope, the very first Star Wars movie. His name was Garandan. He's a Q-Bass spy, and his appearance was basically a voiceover performance. But the only difference was sound designer Ben Burt used stock audio recordings of John Wayne, and what he did, he put in a distortion effect of the leftover audio recordings of John Wayne, and also sped up his voice just to make it sound like an alien species. Like, this is like what the sound of the Imperial spy sounded like. He sounded like wow 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 wow. So that's just basically John Wayne's voice. But the fact is, sound designer Ben Burt used archive audio recordings of John Wayne's voice, and he added a distortion effect, and also picked up the speed on his voiceover recording, and that was used for the Imperial spy Garandan in Star Wars: A New Hope. So technically, it's not the first time someone from the Wayne family was in the Star Wars universe, and that was basically John Wayne in Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. Also, to bring this up, we get to see a similar species of the Q-Bass as well. It's not the same guy, although it's the same species, but it's not the same guy. It's just a different actor. But what the filmmakers did was they still used the archive audio recordings of John Wayne, with the distortion effect and the voice being sped up, it was used again for that other Cubaz creature in the first episode of the Mandalorian. It's the scene where the Mandalorian, the Mythrol were asking for passage, and this Cubaz was telling Mandalorian about the speeder that had the joint in it. It was like wow 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 wow, and the Mandalorian was like, no joys. This is also revealed that the Mandalorian does not like droids at all, because there's another scene where the Mandalorian gets flashbacks of the droids, but I'll get to that in a sec. So back to John Wayne. So that if you hear the voice, that Cubaz's voice during the whole passage sequence between him and the Mandalorian, the Mythrol, and the speeder bike, that is the archive audio recordings of John Wayne being sped up and with the distortion effect. It's nice to see that the Wayne family is in the Star Wars universe. So that's actually nice. Now my last thing is the droid part. Now the Mandalorian does not like droids. When he was a kid, his family died in a droid attack, and the droid army took out his family, and which also explains why he does not like droids. And of course, that's why the Mandalorian does not want that speeder with that droid, because the Mandalorian is like, no droids, please, no droids. And then he gets another speeder, which is basically a beat up old speeder without a droid. Now, of course, towards the end of the pilot episode, when Mandalorian was teaming up with that bounty hunter droid, IG-11, I mean, at one point he was about to get over he was getting over his differences, because he knows that bounty hunter droid is trying to get the bounty from the guards, meaning like he settled his differences and teamed up with that bounty hunter droid IG-11. But unfortunately, his hate for droids snapped back after IG-11 said that he was going to kill Baby Yoda, and this is where Mandalorian is like, no. He decides to kill IG-11, but also back to his parents. The Mandalorian was thinking back to the droid attack that killed his parents, and that was when the armorer was making a new armor for his shoulder, and the scene goes back and forth between the armorer making the armor and flashbacks of the Mandalorian as a kid losing his parents to a droid attack. This basically explains why the Mandalorian does not like droids. And that's basically it. And that's basically my covering of the pilot episode of The Mandalorian. For those of you who are listening, I hope you enjoy this episode, and also to ask, what did you guys think of the pilot episode of The Mandalorian? Did you like the pilot episode? Did you not like the pilot episode? I would love to hear your thoughts. And if I missed out on anything from the pilot episode of The Mandalorian, please let me know in the comments. But other than that, that is it for this episode. Don't forget to like this episode. Also subscribe to my YouTube channel, Mark Codo, where you can hear more podcast episodes of Codovision, and also listen to Codo Cinema as well. And hit the subscribe buttons, that way I can upload more content. And don't forget to check out this episode on Spotify as well. But anyway, that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you all for tuning into Codovision. I am Mark Codo, aka Codoman, your Codovision host. Stay positive and keep on streaming.